I never thought a simple act of kindness at midnight would change my entire life. That night, I was just a tired waitress trying to survive another long shift, counting tips that barely covered rent. The cafe was quiet, its neon sign flickering like it was as exhausted as me. The smell of coffee and old dreams hung in the air. As I wiped down the last table, I saw him sitting outside in the cold, his coat torn, his eyes hidden beneath a hood. He didn't beg or ask for food like most did. He just sat there, staring at the steam from the cup someone had thrown away earlier. My manager had already left. The street was empty, and I was alone with the hum of the coffee machine. Something inside me whispered, "Help him." I hesitated, afraid he might be dangerous, but then I saw his hands, shaking, thin and bruised from the cold. "Hey, are you hungry?" I asked softly through the door. He lifted his head slowly, and for a moment our eyes met. They were the saddest eyes I'd ever seen. "I'm fine," he muttered, his voice hoarse. I knew he wasn't. I unlocked the door again and brought him a plate of leftover soup and bread. "It's not much," I said. He looked at me with disbelief, then nodded slowly. "You shouldn't be out here alone this late," he whispered. "Neither should you," I replied with a weak smile. He smiled back for just a second, then it was gone. I didn't know his name, and he didn't ask for mine. He just ate quietly, every spoonful slow, as if he hadn't tasted warmth in years. When he finished, he stood up, thanked me, and disappeared into the night without another word. I thought I'd never see him again. But night after night, he came back, always at closing time, always sitting at the same table by the window, and I kept giving him food, telling myself it was just leftover soup, just wasted bread, but deep down it was more than that. I didn't know then that this man wasn't who he appeared to, be that under those rags was someone who could change everything I ever dreamed of. Weeks passed, and our strange midnight meetings became part of my routine. Every night, after the last customer left and the lights dimmed, I'd see him waiting in that same spot quiet, almost invisible to the world. The winter wind grew harsher, but he never complained, never asked for anything more than what I gave. Sometimes I'd sit with him for a few minutes, sipping leftover coffee and talking about nothing. He'd ask small questions about life, about dreams, about why I worked so late. I told him the truth, I had no choice. My mother was sick and the bills kept coming. Every cent I made went to medicine and rent. He listened without interrupting, his gaze soft and thoughtful, like he carried 1,000 untold stories behind those tired eyes. One night, I noticed his hands weren't trembling anymore, and he looked cleaner, like he had found a way to wash up. "You seem different tonight," I said with a grin. He smiled faintly. "Maybe kindness has a way of cleaning more than dirt," he replied. His words stayed with me long after he left. My coworkers started to notice too. "You're feeding that guy again?" My friend Lily whispered one evening. "He's probably some addict or scammer. You can't save everyone, you know." I brushed it off, though her words stung. Maybe she was right, but something in me couldn't ignore him. He never looked at me with pity or judgment, just quiet gratitude. Sometimes I caught him glancing at the cafe walls, at the old frame photos of its founder, a man named Richard Hale, who built the place decades ago. The resemblance between the founder's eyes and his was uncanny, but I laughed it off. What were the odds, right? One stormy night, the rain came pouring down so hard the streets looked like rivers. The man didn't show up that night, and I felt an unexpected ache in my chest. I waited until after midnight, but he never came. For the first time in months, I locked up with a heavy heart, staring out the window where he used to sit. Something told me that our quiet routine had just ended, but I didn't know then that his disappearance was just the beginning of a truth I could never have imagined. The next few days felt strangely empty without him. I kept glancing at the door every night, expecting to see his shadow appear against the glow of the streetlight. But he never came. The cafe felt colder, quieter, like it had lost a piece of its soul. My coworkers teased me, saying I probably scared the poor man off with my endless chatter. But I couldn't laugh about it. Something about his sudden disappearance didn't feel right. On the fourth night, as I was closing up, a young man in a suit walked in, drenched from the rain. He looked out of place, sharp, confident, and holding an envelope in his hand. "Are you Emily?" he asked, glancing at the name tag pinned to my uniform. My heart skipped. "Yes. Can I help you?" He smiled politely. "I was asked to give you this." He placed the envelope on the counter, nodded once, and left before I could ask another question. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a neatly folded note and a small, heavy key. The note read, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. I had to leave for a while, but this key belongs to something I want you to have. Go to the old cafe on Willow Street tomorrow at noon. Trust me." There was no name, no signature, but I knew it was from him. My mind raced all night. Why would he send me a key? What cafe? Willow Street had been abandoned for years. I barely slept, my imagination running wild. The next day, I took the bus across town, the key clutched tightly in my hand. When I arrived, I saw a faded sign above a boarded door Hale's Coffee House. The same name on the photos hanging in our cafe. My pulse quickened as I tried the key. It turned smoothly, and the door creaked open to reveal a place frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture, broken lights, and a faint smell of roasted beans lingered in the air. On the counter sat a small envelope with my name written in perfect cursive. I opened it, and my breath caught when I read the words inside. I wasn't homeless. Emily. My name is Richard Hale Jr., and this cafe was once my father's dream. I stood there frozen, staring at the letter in my hands as if the words might change if I blinked too hard. Richard Hale Jr.? The billionaire who disappeared years ago after selling his family's coffee empire. My mind couldn't process it. The man I'd fed soup to every night, the man who sat quietly in the cold, was the heir to one of the biggest cafe chains in the country. My knees felt weak as I sank onto a dusty chair, reading the rest of the letter. I walked away from everything years ago. Money, power, fame, it all meant nothing after I lost the people I loved. I needed to see the world through real eyes again, to feel humanity, to remember what kindness looked like. You showed me that, Emily. You didn't help me for what I had, but for who I was in that moment. You reminded me what my father built this place for, to serve people with heart, not profit. If you're reading this, it means I'm ready to rebuild, and I want you to be part of it. My hands shook as tears blurred my vision. It couldn't be real. Why me? I was just a broke waitress, barely surviving on tips. Still, something deep inside whispered that everything about him had always felt intentional. I looked around the cafe again, imagining how it might have once looked: warm lights, laughter, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. "I didn't think you'd actually come," he said softly. I turned, and there he was, no longer dressed in rags, but in a simple black coat and polished shoes, his hair clean, his eyes brighter but still carrying that same quiet sadness. "You," I whispered, unable to move. He smiled faintly. "Me." I wanted to be angry, to demand answers, to ask why he had lied to me. But instead, all I could say was, "Why didn't you tell me?" He stepped closer, his voice low. "Because I needed someone to see me, not my name." The cafe fell silent again, the weight of his words pressing against my heart. Everything I thought I knew about kindness, trust, and destiny began to unravel right in front of me. I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning between disbelief and anger, yet something about his calm expression made it hard to stay mad. "You lied to me," I finally said, my voice trembling. "All this time, you made me think you were struggling, starving, and you were what, testing me?" He shook his head, stepping closer but keeping his distance as if afraid I'd run. "No tests, Emily. I wasn't pretending to be poor to trick you. I really was lost. I had everything but peace. After my father died, I couldn't bear how the company changed, how greed replaced compassion. I walked away. For years, I lived among people who had nothing, trying to understand what we'd forgotten." His words felt heavy, but sincere. Still, the hurt lingered. "You could have told me the truth," I whispered. He sighed, his gaze softening. "Would you have believed me?" I thought about it and realized maybe I wouldn't have. Who would believe a billionaire heir was sitting outside a cafe eating leftovers? I looked at him, trying to reconcile the man I'd known with the one standing before me. "So why bring me here? Why all of this?" He smiled faintly and gestured around the room. "Because I want to bring this place back to life. My father's first cafe. It's been abandoned for years, but it was built on the same spirit you showed me: kindness, humanity, second chances. I want to reopen it, but I can't do it alone. My heart skipped as I realized what he was saying. You want me to help? He nodded. I want you to manage it. Run it your way. You saw people, Emily. You didn't judge. You gave. That's the kind of soul I need here. I laughed softly, shaking my head. I'm just a waitress. He stepped closer, his tone firm yet gentle. You're more than that. You have the heart this world has forgotten. For the first time, I saw no trace of the broken man I'd met on the sidewalk, only someone renewed, filled with purpose. And though fear still whispered in my chest, a strange feeling of hope began to bloom. Maybe this was my chance, not just his. The next few weeks felt like something out of a dream. Every morning, I met Richard at the old Café on Willow Street. Together, we scrubbed, painted, and repaired everything from the broken chairs to the cracked tiles. He could have easily hired professionals, but he insisted on doing it with his own hands. If we're building something with heart, he said one afternoon while painting a wall, it has to start with ours. I laughed, brushing a streak of white paint off his cheek, but inside I was terrified. What if I failed him? What if this was all too good to be true? I had never managed anything in my life. My world had been late shifts, rude customers, and endless exhaustion. Yet here I was, working beside a man whose name once filled magazines. Still, Richard never treated me like an employee. He listened to my idea show to make the place welcoming. How to offer free meals to the hungry once a week. How to create a pay-it-forward board where customers could prepay a coffee for someone in need. Every time I spoke, his eyes lit up with pride. That's exactly what my father wanted, he'd say. As we worked, stories spilled out between us. He told me about losing his father young, about business partners who twisted his father's legacy, about his decision to walk away from billions just to breathe freely again. I told him about my mother's illness, my struggles, and how close I'd come to giving up before meeting him. We were two broken souls rebuilding something far bigger than a cafe. Were rebuilding faith. The grand reopening day finally came. The once empty shop was now alive again with laughter, fresh flowers, and the smell of roasted coffee. I stood behind the counter in my new apron, trying to hide how fast my heart was beating. You did this, Richard whispered beside me, smiling proudly. No, I said softly, looking around at the glowing lights and smiling faces. We did this. When the doors opened and the first customers walked in, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, valued, alive. And yet, beneath all the joy, I couldn't shake a quiet question: was this truly the end of my struggles, or just the calm before another storm? At first, everything felt perfect. The cafe became a local miracle, a place where strangers met and kindness grew like wildflowers. People loved the warmth of it, the free coffees for the homeless, the laughter that filled every corner. For the first time in my life, I wasn't worrying about rent or late notices. Richard paid me generously, but more than that, he believed in me. Every morning he'd bring 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one for me, and we'd sit by the window where I first used to feed him. It felt poetic, like life had come full circle. But as word spread about the reopening, the media began to dig. Cameras started showing up, reporters asking questions about the billionaire's new partner. Some called me his secret girlfriend. Others claimed I was manipulating him to get his money. I tried to ignore it, but the comments online were cruel. She's just a waitress looking for fame. He's too blind to see she's using him. Each word cut deeper than I wanted to admit. One night after closing, I found Richard sitting alone, staring at his phone. His jaw was tense, eyes dark. They're saying terrible things about you, he murmured. About us. I forced a smile. pretending it didn't matter. Let them talk. We know the truth. But his silence scared me. Over the next few days, he grew distant, taking calls outside, arriving late, avoiding my eyes. Something had changed. One evening, when I came to the cafe early, I heard voices in his office. "You can't keep her here, Richard," a woman said sharply. "She's ruining your image. The board's getting restless." "She's not like that," he argued. "She saved me when I had nothing." "Exactly," she replied coldly. "You owe her gratitude, not your business." I froze behind the door, my heart pounding. The reality hit me like a punch. I was the problem. The kindness that had brought us together was now tearing his world apart. When I walked out that night, the cafe lights flickered just like they had the night I first saw him in the cold. Except this time, I was the one standing outside, wondering if I still belonged in the story I helped rebuild. The next morning, I didn't go to the cafe. I couldn't. My chest felt heavy, my mind replaying every word I had overheard. Maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't belong in his world. I had come from nothing, and now I was standing in a spotlight I never asked for. Still, a small part of me hoped he'd call, that he'd tell me none of it mattered, but the phone stayed silent. By evening, I decided to go back, just to see how things were. When I arrived, the cafe looked different. There were reporters outside, lights flashing, people talking about a press announcement. I hid behind the crowd, my heart pounding as I saw Richard standing at the podium inside. He looked polished, confident, the man the world remembered. "I owe everything to this cafe," he said into the microphone, "and to the people who helped bring it back." My heart lifted for a second until he added, "From this day on, Hales Coffee House will be run by our corporate team as part of a larger expansion." My stomach dropped. The reporters clapped, cameras flashed, and I just stood there, numb. He didn't mention me. Not once. I turned away before anyone could see the tears forming in my eyes. That night, I packed my things from the tiny apartment he had rented for me near the cafe. I left the key on the counter with a note that simply said, "Thank you for everything. Take care of the dream." I didn't hate him. I couldn't. But it felt like the universe was reminding me where I truly stood. A waitress who dared to dream too high. Days passed before I finally got a message from him. "Emily, please meet me. I owe you an explanation." I almost deleted it, but something inside pushed me to go. We met at the park bench near the cafe, the same one where he used to sit in the cold. He looked nothing like the man I remembered that first night, yet his eyes carried the same guilt. "You weren't supposed to find out that way," he said softly. I crossed my arms, holding back tears. "You mean the part where you erased me?" His silence told me everything I didn't want to hear. The silence between us stretched until it felt unbearable. Finally, he sighed and said, "Emily, I never meant to hurt you. The board threatened to pull every investment if I didn't take back control. They said keeping you involved would destroy the brand, make it look like a publicity stunt." His words made my stomach twist. "So you just erased me? Pretended I was never part of it?" I whispered, my voice cracking. He took a hesitant step closer. "I thought I could fix it quietly, then bring you back once things settled down. But everything spiraled too fast. The press, the investors, they turned something pure into something ugly." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "You should have trusted me. I didn't help you for fame or money. I helped you because you were human, because you needed kindness." He looked at me with regret, his hands trembling slightly. "You showed me what real kindness looks like, Emily. That's why I couldn't bear to see your name dragged through the dirt. I thought I was protecting you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Protecting me? You broke me instead." The wind blew softly, carrying the faint smell of roasted coffee from the distance, the cafe we'd built together. Now just another corporate story. He reached into his pocket and handed me an envelope. "This is yours. It's your share of the cafe profits. It's the least I can do. I stared at the envelope but didn't take it. I don't want your money, Richard. I wanted your honesty. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The world around us moved on, cars passing, children laughing in the distance, but we were stuck in a moment that no apology could undo. Finally, I said, "You once told me kindness changes people. Maybe it did. But now I see that kindness without truth is just another illusion." His eyes glistened, but he said nothing. I walked away, leaving him standing by the bench, the envelope still in his hand. My heart felt shattered, but somewhere deep inside, a quiet strength began to stir. Maybe this was what resilience really meant, not clinging to the people who hurt you, but learning to rebuild again, even when your heart was still bleeding. Months passed after that night, and life slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. I found a small job at another cafe across town, nothing fancy, just a simple place with chipped mugs and regulars who knew my name. The pay wasn't much, but it was honest, and the peace I felt there was something money couldn't buy. Every morning I'd open the doors, smell the first brew of coffee, and remind myself that kindness didn't need an audience. Some nights I'd walk past Hale's coffee house, now shining brighter than ever, filled with laughter and lights. My chest would ache a little, but I didn't regret what happened. I had learned that not every story of kindness ends in a fairy tale, but every act of kindness still matters. One rainy evening as I was closing up, the bell above the door jingled. I turned around and froze. Richard stood there, soaked from the rain, holding a small paper bag. His eyes were softer this time, humbled. "I heard you open this place," he said with a faint smile. I nodded cautiously. "Just a little cafe. Nothing special." He shook his head. "It's special because you're here." He placed the bag on the counter and slid it toward me. Inside was a simple keychain shaped like a coffee bean, engraved with the words, "For the one who taught me to see." I stepped down, he said quietly. I sold my shares, started a foundation in my father's name to help struggling cafes and single mothers. It's what we should have done from the beginning. I didn't know what to say. My eyes burned, but this time not from pain. "You didn't have to do that for me," I whispered. "I didn't," he replied. "I did it because of what you showed me." For a moment, silence filled the room again, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. He left without asking for forgiveness, and I didn't need to give it. Some things heal not through words, but through change. As I locked up that night, I looked out at the rain and smiled. Once I had given a stranger a bowl of soup, and in return, life had given me something priceless, the proof that even the smallest kindness can echo far beyond what we imagine.